Might be seated, please. Hey, members of the jury, I think we have things sorted out. Just for your information, we'll take another break later, but it'll probably be like 10 minutes. But for now, Mr. Frank.
Thank you, Your Honor. And thank you, everybody, for your patience. Your Honor, we are recalling Agent Ryerson for actually two matters. One is to readdress the Exhibit 1007 clip that was played, and to put context in the short video that was shown as Exhibit 107. Agent Ryerson, while we were on a break, did you have an opportunity to review Exhibit 127, which is the composite with King's body-worn camera, correct?
Yes.
During that same time period?
Yes.
And prior to the short clip of Lane's body camera that you were shown as Exhibit 1007, is there a discussion about drug use by the officers and attempting to speak to Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
And hearing that section of the audio, did that help you to understand what Mr. Floyd might have been saying that you were asked about by counsel?
Yes.
And, Your Honor, then we would ask to play 127, Exhibit 127, which is queued up to 2020-30 through 2021-01, where that phrase appears that Mr. Ryerson, Agent Ryerson, was asked about.
Please understand. No. Please, man, I can't breathe.
Get up on the sidewalk, please. One side or the other, please.
My face getting up bad.
Here, should we get his legs up?
Oh my God.
Nope, just leave him.
Oh
Just
my
leave him.
God.
Leave him. Yep, just leave him.
All right.
I'm dead.
The park's still sitting on the car there.
Look at my face, man.
I believe so. We found a pipe.
Get out of the car.
Yeah, he was right.
I ain't keeping this real.
Mercedes?
Please,
Yeah, the
Across
blue
the street, park's
Mercedes.
watching.
please,
Two other people with
please,
him.
I can't breathe.
So the record should reflect that we've played through 2021-10 with the quote that you were asked about appearing really at 2021-01, correct?
Yes.
Having heard it in context, are you able to tell what Mr. Floyd is saying there?
Yes, I believe Mr. Floyd was saying, I ain't doing no drugs.
So it's a little different than what you were asked about when you only saw a portion of the video, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then to clarify what we did earlier, it would appear that I had inverted a couple of the exhibit numbers, correct?
Yes.
We've now straightened that out. Exhibits 53 and 54 are both parts of the Dragon Walk video. You have seen those, and they are, in fact, what was obtained from the Dragon Walk, correct?
Correct.
And also Exhibit 55, is that a portion of the Dragon Walk video as well?
Yes.
And so, Your Honor, just to be clear, what we had initially offered as Exhibit 54 should actually be Exhibit 53. And we will, for clarity, offer Exhibits 53, 54, and 55.
Any objection to any of those? 53, 54, and 55 are received.
I don't intend to publish them at this time, Your Honor.
Okay, anything that was not received is received, and go ahead and publish. Which one are you going to publish?
We are not going to publish them.
Not going to, okay, thank you.
Mr. Frank, your mask.
Your Honor, I am requesting permission to publish a portion of Exhibit 55. Agent Ryerson, you have had an opportunity to review the Dragon Walk surveillance video,
Yes, sir.
and there are portions of the video where Mr. Floyd is present, correct?
Yes, sir.
And it shows various interactions. But after Mr. Floyd leaves, there are interactions between other people walking past. The camera continues to run the same perspective.
Correct.
Your Honor, I would ask for permission to publish Exhibit 55 starting at the timestamp 203848. And Agent Ryerson, I'm going to ask you to watch the area of the vehicles and the passengers in the vehicles.
Yes, sir.
Were you able to see?
Yes, sir.
What does it appear that individual does?
The individual in the red hat you're referring to?
Yes.
Appears as though he throws something.
So he's looking initially through the passenger or through the vehicle, looking in the area of the police officers, correct?
Appeared that way.
It appears that he then reaches into his backpack and retrieves something,
Yes,
and it appears that he then throws it off to his right shoulder, right?
that's correct.
And it appeared to go some distance away.
Yes, sir.
Would that be consistent with someone trying to get rid of something that they don't want the police to find?
Could be, yes.
I have no further questions.
Anything further? All right, thank you, Agent. You are excused from your subpoena. Thank you.
The state will call McKenzie Anderson to the stand.
Raise your right hand. You swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Proceed, please. And if you can use this. Lift your finger, Isaac. And if you would not mind, we'd like to have you remove your mask for testimony. And if you could begin by giving us your full name, spelling each of your names.
McKenzie Anderson, McKenzie
Mr. Frank.
Thank you, Your Honor. And can you tell us how you're currently employed?
I work for the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension in the Forensic Science Laboratory.
So you are a scientist, a forensic scientist?
I'm a forensic scientist, yes.
Can you describe for the jurors your educational background to be a forensic scientist?
I have a bachelor's degree in forensic science from the University of North Dakota, and I have a master's of forensic science degree from George Washington University.
So when did you achieve your bachelor's of science degree in forensic science?
2007,
And where from?
University of North Dakota.
I've said that already. And so you worked on a master's degree as well.
Yes,
Where did you get that from? George Washington?
George Washington,
And what year was that?
2009.
So what kinds of things do you have to do to get a master's in forensic science?
The coursework included criminal justice coursework, law courses. There was a lot of hands-on application of forensic practices, and my concentration was in forensic molecular biology. So there was a lot of coursework dedicated to DNA testing.
And after you achieved your bachelor's degree in forensic science and working on your master's, did you begin working in the field as well?
Yes.
Where did you initially start working in the field?
I initially started working at a lab called Bodie Technology that was out in Virginia. It was a private forensic laboratory, and I did DNA testing while there.
Prior to that, did you have some experience with the BCA?
Prior to that, I was an intern at the BCA between my first and second year of graduate school.
And what kind of work did you do during your internship?
I did projects with our latent print section and also with the mitochondrial DNA section. They had to do with validating a new instrument that they were using at the time.
So then you went to work at Bodie Technology, which
Yes.
is BODE, correct?
Correct.
And what did you do there?
I started out working in their group called Customized Casework. I did a lot of technician work for them. After that, I moved to a role in their databasing unit. So I did convicted offender samples from a variety of states who contracted with that lab.
And so at some point, did you leave that lab, obviously?
Yes.
Where did you go?
I started at the BCA in 2009, in October of 2009.
And what job did you take at the BCA?
I was hired on as a forensic scientist in the biology section.
And what does the biology section do?
The biology section does DNA testing and also body fluid identification, which is the identification of bodily fluids as it's relevant to a case, and including sample collection from a variety of physical items of evidence that come into the lab for DNA testing.
So when did you start doing that?
I was hired in October of 2009.
When you get that job for the BCA, was there some specific training that made you go through because you were hired by the BCA?
Yes.
Can you describe that for the jury?
So the DNA training program takes about a year to complete. It starts with, typically people will start with that body fluid identification portion first. They'll get trained in that, and then they'll move on to DNA testing. So all of that training includes watching other scientists do their work, many practice samples, competency sets that we need to do. We do written tests, oral tests before we are signed off and able to work independently and issue our own reports.
So are you still working in the biology section?
Yes.
And at some point, did you take on additional responsibilities at the BCA?
Yes. In 2014, I joined our crime scene team.
And have you been working on a crime scene team since then?
Yes.
At some point, did you become a crime scene team leader?
Yes, I did in 2016.
And we'll come back to that in a little bit. Are you a member of any professional organizations or affiliations?
I am. I am a member of the Midwest Association of Forensic Scientists and also the American Academy of Forensic Sciences.
And so we've heard a little bit about the BCA, the different divisions they have. You're in the laboratory division, correct?
Correct.
Can you just describe for the jurors, what all the laboratory does? Not in any great detail necessarily, but just to give an overview of what it does.
The laboratory has a number of different sections that processes different types of evidence. These sections include DNA, drug chemistry, latent prints, firearms, toxicology. So depending on what the item of evidence is, it gets routed to the appropriate section of the lab. Sometimes there are item of evidence items that we work on in multiple sections of the lab. So it just kind of depends on what the request is and what the item of evidence is that we're working on.
And is the crime scene team considered a separate section?
Yes.
Do you know how many crime scene teams there are?
We have two main crime scene teams. We have a team down in St. Paul at our BCA headquarters, and then we have a second team up in our regional lab in Bemidji.
And so when did you started working on a crime scene team in approximately, what did you say, 2014?
Yes,
And you became a team leader in 2016?
correct.
Is there something you need to do to become a crime scene team leader?
Yes, in order to join the crime scene team initially, there is a lot of training that we go through at the lab. That includes, lectures and presentations and hands-on practical exercises, oral boards in order to join the team. To become a team leader, there is some additional training that we go through, specifically that covers shooting scene reconstruction and bloodstain pattern analysis, which again comes with its own tests and oral boards before we're able to issue reports in those sections.
So as you are working there now, you're in both sections, the crime scene team and the biology or DNA section?
That's correct.
And so when you're on a crime scene team, how do you generally get called out on a particular case?
So we are on call on a rotational basis, but we're on call for a week at a time. So when we're on call, we're available 24/7 to respond to a potential crime scene. And our requests come in from an agent who will call me and kind of give me a synopsis or a rundown of the case that they have and the request that they have for us to come out. And if it meets our criteria, I will send out word to the rest of the crime scene team that we need to respond.
Any idea, well, let's look at like the last year, how many crime scenes you've been to?
Last year, I responded to about 30 crime scenes.
Like last calendar year?
Yes.
Has that sort of been a typical year?
That was more than normal.
Now, is the lab, the BCA lab, accredited?
Yes, we are.
Can you describe to the jury what that means to be accredited?
Accreditation is a process in which trained auditors and assessors and other scientists who work in the field come into our lab and do an independent assessment on our entire quality system and all of our laboratory sections. They evaluate us on hundreds of criteria to make sure that we are qualified to perform the testing that we do.
And do you know how long the lab has been accredited?
We have been accredited since the 90s, since 1994.
Over time, different accrediting boards?
Yes, that's correct.
And have you gone through the accreditation process?
Yes, I have been employed while we have gone through many accreditation cycles.
So it's a fancy way of saying your work gets checked by other professionals.
Essentially, yes.
Does the lab also perform audits of other labs for their accreditation?
Yes, we do.
And were you called to a scene on May 25th of 2020?
Yes, I was.
And how did you get called out? Do you remember how that call came to you?
I received a phone call from Assistant Special Agent in Charge Mike Phil around 11:30 on the night of May 25th, 2020. And he requested crime scene assistance to a scene in South Minneapolis.
And did you in fact then respond?
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors who all was on the crime scene team that night?
Our team, typically it consists of a team leader, a team member, a technician, and then a photographer who is a special agent at the BCA. For this particular scene, I responded with myself and the technician. I opted to not go with the member initially and just let him know that we might need him if more information came to light, but initially I just responded to the scene with myself, the technician, and our photographer.
And so when you get this call, you gather them together and head to that scene, correct?
Yes, the laboratory scientists on the crime scene team, we respond to the headquarters in St. Paul, so then we can grab our crime scene truck and then we all respond to the scene together.
So that crime scene truck has all your equipment and stuff you need.
Yes,
And what we sometimes see on TV at a crime scene, like almost an RV.
yes, exactly.
And do you recall going to the scene then in Minneapolis because of this?
Yes.
And do you recall what time it was that you arrived on scene?
We arrived on scene, it was about 1:15, so early in the morning on the 26th.
And do you recall how long you were at that scene?
We were there for a little over 2 hours.
And that location in Minneapolis, do you remember the intersection?
Yes, it was at the intersection of Chicago Avenue and East 38th Street.
And when you get there, what's sort of the first step in the process?
When the team arrives, we get a briefing from the agent on scene.
And what kind of information did you learn at that point?
The briefing that we got included that an employee of the Cup Foods restaurant called 911 when they suspected someone was using what they thought could be counterfeit money. Minneapolis police officers arrived to the scene. They attempted to arrest Mr. Floyd. There was perhaps a little bit of a struggle to get him into the back seat of the squad car. Eventually he was moved to the ground. At some point, Mr. Floyd became unresponsive and was then taken by ambulance to HCMC.
So that's the information you were given about why this was a scene.
Yes.
And from there then, did you proceed to process that area?
Yes.
And can you describe, when you first arrive, what you see as that scene in general?
When we first arrived, we saw at that intersection that there was 2 vehicles that were parked on East 38th Street. There was a Mercedes-Benz SUV and a Minneapolis squad car parked behind it on 38th Street by Dragon Walk Restaurant. Other than that, there wasn't a whole lot else that was around at the time. It was raining when we got there, and from my quick walkthrough that we do with the agents, I didn't necessarily see a lot of processing that was potentially going to be needed at that particular scene.
And at some point where you're at the scene, did you become aware that there had been a video taken of the incident?
Yes, after we had been on scene for a little while, I was made aware of a video.
Did you watch a portion of that video?
I did watch just a small portion of it.
And did that help you try and locate areas that might be of interest?
Yes, the primary reason for watching it was because we didn't know exactly where the incident had occurred. The assumption was when we got there was it happened where the squad car was parked, but by watching the video we could see that it was actually around the corner on Chicago Avenue. So the objective of me watching the video was to see where Mr. Floyd could have been on the street, so I could specifically look at that part of the street.
And did you?
Yes.
Did you see anything there?
No, I did not.
Now, as part of the process to take photographs of the scene,
Yes.
and have you, or did you in fact take a number of photographs of this scene?
Yes, the special agent who was with me took a number of photographs on scene.
And would those photographs help you describe to the jury what you saw at the scene that night?
Yes.
And have we shown you previously what have been marked as exhibits 129 through 135?
Yes.
And do those appear to be photographs taken that night of the scene?
Yes.
Your Honor, we would offer 129 through 135.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
129 through 135 inclusive are received.
And then we'll publish 129, please. Can you describe for the jurors what's depicted in this photograph?
In Exhibit 129, this is a photograph of the photographer is standing on Chicago Avenue, facing south. That cross street that you see is East 38th Street. Cup Foods is on the left on the corner of that intersection, and then just beyond that, you can see a portion of the Minneapolis squad car.
And there's appears to be what we call crime scene tape, correct?
Yes, the crime scene tape was up prior to the arrival of the crime scene team.
And moving to Exhibit 130. Describe this, please.
This is a photograph taken again from Chicago Avenue looking north, and it's another view of Cup Foods.
And Exhibit 131.
131 is a photograph from 38th Street looking east. This is a view of the Mercedes-Benz SUV and also the squad car parked behind it.
And does this photograph also show some of the crime scene tape?
Yes, it does.
And there's a stylus in front of you if you want to just point it out to the jurors on the screen.
There's crime scene tape running along in front of the SUV, and then there is a little bit of crime scene tape further down the block as well.
And did the crime scene tape, appear to be appropriate for securing that scene?
Yes, I thought so.
Did it, in fact, essentially encircle that intersection?
Yes, it did.
So we'll go to Exhibit 132. And describe this for the jurors as well, and if you could also just point out the crime scene tape here.
Sure. This is a photo on East 38th Street again. This view is looking west, and it shows the Mercedes-Benz in the foreground, the Minneapolis squad car parked behind it. There's crime scene tape behind the squad, and then a little bit further down on the other side of the intersection as well.
And when you are well, let's go to Exhibit 133 then as well. Do you see this? Can you describe this for the jurors, please?
Exhibit 133 is a photo taken across the street from where that other photo was that we just saw. This is on the same sidewalk as Cup Foods. That red awning belongs to Cup Foods. And this is again looking west on 38th Street.
When you're at a crime scene, particularly one out of doors like this, do you also try and locate security cameras?
Yes, that is part of what we do.
And in this photograph here, Exhibit 133, do we see some security cameras that you spotted while you were there?
Yes, there are a couple couple security cameras. Do you want me to circle them?
Sure. And so that's just customary to take note of those for investigative purposes.
It is.
I'm going to ask to back up to 132, please. And this is where we're seeing the other side of the street by the Dragon Walk, correct?
Yes.
Is there a security camera in this photograph as well?
Oh, yes, sorry. There is this one on Dragon Walk on the corner.
And then going to Exhibit 134, can you describe this for the jurors as well?
This is a photograph taken from Chicago Avenue, slightly closer to Cup Foods. Cup Foods is that building on the left. And then you can also see Squad 320 in full view on the other side of 38th Street.
So the crime scene tape was almost redundant in some areas, right?
It was a little, yes.
And then are there security cameras visible in this photograph as well?
Yes, you can see the one on Dragon Walk and the one underneath the awning of Cup Foods.
So now if we go to Exhibit 135, is there a better view of that?
Yes, Exhibit 135 is a photo specifically of the security camera underneath the awning of Cup Foods.
And when you take that down. When you're out there, you make note of those security cameras for investigators.
Yes.
When you were at the scene, did you notice any blood at the scene?
No, I searched the street around where the squad car was parked, the street on the sidewalk, and then also the street and the sidewalk where, when we had watched the video, where the approximate location that we thought he could have been, and I did not see any blood.
But you understood that it had rained since the event, correct?
Yes,
And that could have interfered with the scene.
it could have.
And then you noted the two vehicles present. Other than those two vehicles, did you collect any evidence from the scene?
No, there was no evidence collected from the scene.
And what was decided about what to do with the vehicles?
It was decided that both of the vehicles would be towed back to the BCA for further processing.
Why would you process them at the garage rather than out there?
It's a common practice for us to tow vehicles back to the BCA. It's so we can process them in a more controlled environment with better lighting. We're not out there in the dark, in the rain, and we can do it in a controlled setting with all of the equipment that we need around.
And so were those vehicles in fact towed from the scene?
They were.
And were you present when that was done?
Yes,
And Agent Ryerson was involved in that process, correct?
he was.
And so then you left the scene after that at approximately 3:30 in the morning.
Yes.
So what was the next step in the process for the crime scene team then?
The next step that we did, I arranged with Agent Ryerson we agreed upon a time to process the actual vehicles. And so we agreed that we would do them on May 27th.
So that would be essentially the next day now, correct?
Yes,
Is that customary to essentially wait a day to process a vehicle?
it is.
Where were the vehicles at that time?
They both were towed to a secure garage that we have at the BCA that we use for processing vehicles.
And did you in fact then process the vehicles on May 27th?
Yes, we did.
Do you remember approximately when you started the work on those vehicles?
We started at about 9 in the morning, I'd say, processing the vehicles.
Who all was involved in processing the vehicles?
To process the vehicles, it was myself, a team member, and an agent who was taking photos for us.
And can you just describe kind of the overall process that you take when you're going to process a vehicle?
So the first step that we do is we will photograph and document the outside of the vehicle in its condition that it was when we towed it from the scene. After that, we'll open up the doors and take photographs of the interior of the vehicle as it is before anybody moves or touches anything. And then after that, we start going through the contents of the vehicle and marking items as necessary for collection.
And when you processed these vehicles, what kind of information did you have about the incident itself? Did you get any further information than when you originally were at the scene?
No, there really was very little additional information that was known at the time, so not much had changed, I guess, from my perspective, from just that day that had passed.
We saw a lot of photographs of the scene. Did you also take a lot of photographs of the vehicles?
Yes.
What's the purpose of taking that many photographs?
Just documentation purposes, so we can photograph, like I said, the condition of everything that it was prior to us doing anything or moving anything, and then as we move objects around and as we find items of evidence, we are documenting and photographing its location, the condition of the items that we're taking, just so everything is thoroughly documented and someone else can then look at the photos and get an idea of what we did.
And when you are processing a vehicle, do you always know for sure what would become an item of evidence in the future?
No, that can be said about any vehicle or any scene really that we process.
When you started the processing of these vehicles, did you know that they were going to be kept by the BCA?
Yes, I do believe I knew that the intention was always to hold on to the vehicles, yes.
So even after you process them, they're going to stay in the custody of the BCA?
Yes.
And have you looked at what we've marked as exhibits 137 through 149?
Yes.
And do you recognize those as photographs taken during the processing of the Mercedes-Benz SUV?
Yes.
And would those photographs help you explain what you did to the jury?
Yes.
Your Honor, to offer exhibits 137 through 149.
Any objection?
No objection.
137 through 149 are received.
So then let's go to 137, please. So is this then the Mercedes SUV that you processed on May 27th?
Yes, this is the SUV we processed, and this is the condition it was the morning that we started the processing.
And where is this location?
This is in the BCA processing garage at our headquarters in St. Paul.
Do you remember at the time you did this processing what information you had about this vehicle itself?
The information that I had that was kind of helping guide my search of the vehicle, again, was just that there was potentially some blood that could be present on either of the vehicles. The other thing that I knew about was money. The potential to have counterfeit money could be found in any of the vehicles. So I had those things in mind. Other than that, there wasn't necessarily anything specific I was looking for, just looking through to see if there's anything of note that I needed to collect forensically or investigatively.
And why did you think there might be some blood to look for?
Just because of the information that I had at the briefing and the scene, that there was a little bit of a struggle to perhaps get Mr. Floyd in the backseat of the squad car. And I had information that he could have been bleeding possibly from like the nose or mouth.
And did you have any information about whether he may have been under the influence of something?
No, I did not have that information at that time.
When you, all right, so let's go to Exhibit 138 then. And describe what's depicted here.
Exhibit 138 is a photo of the driver's seat of the vehicle with the driver's side door open.
And this is how it appeared upon first opening the SUV?
Yes, this is how it appeared when we first opened it and before anything had been moved or collected.
And then let's go to Exhibit 139. I'm sorry. We apparently haven't put those up on the screen. Can we go back to 138? And actually, I guess 137? These were not up on the screen earlier, is that correct? So again, 137 depicts the vehicle in your garage, correct?
Yes.
And then 138, can you put that up, please? And that is the driver's side as it appeared.
Yes.
And then I think we are on 139. And this is the front passenger side, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Now in the center of this photograph, you'll see a blue bag or envelope. Do you see that?
Yes.
Are you familiar with what that is?
Yes.
Can you describe that for the jurors, please?
That is called a Faraday Bag. That is something that we use to put electronics in, specifically cell phones. So there was a cell phone observed on the front passenger seat of the vehicle, and that was put into that bag by our agents prior to us towing the vehicle. The purpose of that is to prevent anyone from remotely accessing a cell phone or trying to, perhaps delete data or change anything on the phone.
So it essentially just locks people out of that phone.
Yes.
And then 140, please. And again, describe this for the jurors.
This is a photo of the rear passenger side of the SUV.
And Exhibit 141. Can you describe that for the jurors, please?
This is a photo of the trunk area of the SUV with the liftgate open.
And then going to Exhibit 142. Can you describe what's depicted in this photograph?
This is a photo that is of the front passenger seat area of the vehicle, a little closer in. You can see a portion of the floor of the seat and also the center console.
In the center console, there appears to be a small white, looks like a pill, correct?
Yes, next to the gum, there is a small white pill.
When this photograph was taken, did you have any knowledge that the case involved anything with pills?
No, not at all.
And so then you preserve this area by taking photographs of it all, correct?
Correct.
And that becomes part of the investigative file, the photographs?
Yes.
And after the vehicle is fully processed, what's the process that you go through with it?
After everything is photographed, at that point, then I start marking items for evidence collection by putting down item tense or an item number, and then those items are rephotographed after I mark them.
And in fact, during this search, did you remove some money from the vehicle?
Yes, I did.
Where was that money located?
Money was located on, there was one bill on the front passenger seat, and the other bills were in the gap between the front passenger seat and the center console.
And can you show the jurors kind of in this photograph 142 where that would be?
It was in this gap, but a little bit further back
Were
next to
they,
the seat.
I'm sorry, were they easily visible there, or
No, you can't see it here.
were they stuffed down in between?
They were.
And have you also seen what we've marked as Exhibit 136?
Yes.
And is that a photograph that was taken at the end of, well, after the vehicle had been processed?
Yes.
Your Honor, we'd offer 136.
Any objection?
No objection.
So let's publish 136, please. I've gone out of order, Your Honor, I know.
I'm just saying it is received.
Okay, thank you. That's how this works. So 136, you see the vehicle here.
Yes.
There appears to be some red tape on the door areas. Can you explain that to the jury?
Yes. Once we were done processing the vehicle, all of the doors were tape sealed and initialed, like you can see there.
And why is that done?
We do that to preserve the item of evidence and to ensure that no one enters the car, and if someone has, it would be obvious and that the tape seal is broken.
And then where is the SUV taken after that?
The SUV is towed to a secure storage facility.
Now, with regard to this blue SUV, were you asked to search that again later?
I was.
And do you recall when that was that you did that?
I searched the vehicle for a second time on December 9th of 2020.
And do you recall why that was done?
Special Agent Ryerson had relayed to me that there was a request from the Attorney General's office to collect additional items from the SUV.
And so did you then, well, did you have were you given specific information about what to recover from the vehicle?
Yes, I was given specific things to look for.
And what was that?
I was told to collect Suboxone, pills in the center console, gum, if there was any gum present, and money. And then also there was a request to photograph some of the contents of the luggage in the trunk.
And have you seen what we've marked as exhibits 143 through 149?
Yes,
And are those photographs taken during the second processing of the SUV?
yes.
Your Honor, to offer 143 through 149?
If not received before, they are received now.
Yeah, they are, I'm sorry. Duplicating efforts. And so showing you exhibit 143 again, please. We're showing you 143. And is this photograph, can we publish this as well, Your Honor? Is this photograph taken during the second processing of the vehicle?
Yes, it was.
And were the seals intact when you began that?
All of the seals were intact on the vehicle.
And so what are we seeing here on this evidence tape? What is the handwriting?
The handwriting is initials CM. That's one of our agents. And then the date that it was tape sealed up initially, so 5/27/2020.
And did you then break those seals and begin a secondary processing of that?
Yes,
And I'd like to move then to Exhibit 144. And can you describe what's depicted in this photograph?
In this photograph, you can see inside the front driver's side of the SUV, and there is an item of evidence that has been marked with that 46 item tent.
And so why do you do that?
Every item that we collect in a case gets its own unique item number, so that way we can track it through the lab and the chain of custody after that point when it's collected.
All right, so let's proceed then to Exhibit 145. And is this now a close-up of item 46?
Yes, this is a close-up of item 46. It was a Suboxone packet that was opened on the driver's side floor.
And are you familiar generally with what Suboxone is?
Generally, a little bit.
What is it?
It is a prescription medication used for adults with an opioid addiction.
And so was this item recovered by you?
Yes.
And then if we could go to Exhibit 146. Can you describe what's in this photograph, please?
In this photograph is an item of evidence that has been marked as item 47, which is on the front driver's seat.
And if we can go to Exhibit 147. Is this then a close-up of item 47?
Yes, this is a close-up of item 47, which was an unopened packet of Suboxone on the driver's seat.
And can we then proceed to Exhibit 148? Describe what's depicted in this photograph.
In Exhibit 148, there is an item of evidence marked as BCA item 48, and that is referring to the 2 pills that you can see there in the center console.
And appears to be the same kind of pill we saw in the previous photograph from the first processing of the vehicle, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And so were these the pills that you were specifically asked to retrieve from the vehicle?
Yes, they were.
And did you in fact take those 2 pills?
I did.
And if we could go to 149, how many pills did you find there?
There were 2 pills in the center console.
And did you recover them both as item 48?
Yes, both of them were collected together as item 48.
So why collect them together?
Because they were in close proximity, like you can see there, and they both had the same markings on them as well.
And what did you do with those after you recovered them from the vehicle?
After they're recovered from the vehicle, they're packaged up by myself. They're tape sealed in a package, and they're given a BCA barcode, so then I can transfer it to the appropriate section of the lab for testing.
And so was that done, were they made available to another section of the lab?
Yes, they were sent to our drug chemistry section.
And I understand you did some other work in processing the vehicle at that time, but nothing of additional evidentiary value removed from the vehicle at that time.
Correct.
And now, going back to the initial processing on May 27th, did you also process Squad 320 on that day?
Yes.
And I would ask you if you have looked at exhibits, well, let's just start with Exhibit 150. And is that a photograph taken from the processing of the squad car?
Yes.
You're ready to offer Exhibit 150?
150 is received.
So if we could look at Exhibit 150, can you describe that for the jurors, please?
Exhibit 150 is a photograph of Minneapolis squad car number 320. This is the condition as it was towed from the scene, and also the morning of the 27th when we began processing on it.
And this is in the BCA garage?
It is.
So I'm now going to offer, Your Honor, Exhibits 152 through 169.
Any objection?
No objection to those, Your
Exhibits 152 through 169 inclusive are received.
So we'll skip over 150 and go to 151 and go to 152, please. Can you describe what's depicted in this photograph for the jurors?
In Exhibit 152, this photograph is of the front driver's side area of the squad car with the door open.
And you had some information about a struggle when they were trying to get Mr. Floyd into the squad car, correct?
Yes.
So why take a photograph of the front driver's side?
When we're processing a vehicle, we document all of it, regardless of the circumstances. We just will photographically document everything about the vehicle before we start processing it.
So if we go to 153 now, please. And this is a photograph of what?
This is a photograph of the driver's side door, like the pocket on the door.
And so when you have this photograph taken, do you have any knowledge that these items have anything to do with the case?
No,
But just to document, you take this photograph.
exactly.
In Exhibit 154, what is this?
Exhibit 154 is a closer photo of the driver's side floor of the squad.
And again, just to document the scene.
Yes.
And 155, describe this for the jurors, please.
This is a photograph of the contents of the front passenger side pocket on the door.
And 156,
This is a photograph of the front passenger seat of the squad.
and so again, these are just taken to document for future reference if needed.
Yes.
Now I'd like to show you Exhibit 157. And can you describe for the jurors what's depicted in this photograph?
In Exhibit 157, this is a photograph of the rear driver's side of the squad. You can see a little bit of the rear driver's side seat and then the interior of the rear driver's side door.
Is this, well, prior to this, had you processed other police squad cars?
Yes.
I assume as an adult you've sat in the back seat of regular cars before?
Yes.
The back seat of a squad car here a little bit different than the typical vehicle?
Yes.
How so?
The back seat, you can kind of see the cage, the glass that separates the front of the vehicle from the rear of the vehicle, and all of the plastic that's up on the back side of the seats. The back seat itself is also rubber, and yeah, they're just a little bit different looking, obviously, than a regular vehicle. There's isn't cloth seats or anything like that.
So if we go to Exhibit 158, this is a view into the back seat of the squad car, correct?
Yes.
And that's how it looked as you began processing that vehicle on May 27th.
Yes, it is.
And fair to say that the backseat area is a lot smaller in a squad car than it is in a regular passenger car like this.
Yes.
And showing you Exhibit 159 then. This is a view of the backseat from the other side, the passenger side.
Yes, this is a perspective from the passenger side, the rear passenger side of the squad.
And Exhibit 160 as well.
This is a photo of the back seat taken from the perspective, again, of the rear passenger side of the vehicle.
Now there appears to be a strap item on the back seat. Do you see that?
Yes, there was a black strap on the rear passenger seat.
And there appears to be a shoe on the floor, correct?
Yes, there was a pair of shoes on the floor. In this particular photo, you can see the right shoe. The left shoe is on the other side.
On the floor of the other side.
Yes.
And Exhibit 161. Now this is a closer up photo of the right shoe on the passenger side, correct?
Correct.
And again, just documenting the location of that shoe.
Yes.
Now, if we can go to Exhibit 162, what does this depict?
This is a photograph of the trunk area of the squad. That was a large removable plastic tote that had various items and supplies in it.
And again, didn't have any specific information that this area of the squad car was involved in the incident, did you?
No, we did not.
But you still document this?
Yes.
So I think what we can do is just kind of scroll through exhibits 163 through 166, please. So each of those photographs depicts the stuff that was in the back seat of the squad car, correct?
That's correct.
And that's done again, just to document what's there.
Yes.
And were certain items then, I think you can take it down, please, documented by you and recovered?
Yes.
And did that include the pair of shoes
Yes.
and that strap in the vehicle?
Yes.
And as well, did you see any blood stains or what appeared to be blood stains in the vehicle?
Yes, I did.
I'm going to show you exhibit 167. Do you see that photograph? Do you
Yes.
see? Okay.
Oh, yes.
And so the strap is labeled as what item?
As item 9.
And the shoe,
The shoe is item 8.
and were both shoes collected?
Yes.
And going to exhibit 168, this is a close-up of that shoe, correct?
Correct.
And was that shoe removed?
Yes, it was.
And did you in fact remove it?
I did, yes.
And did it have any apparent blood on it?
No, blood was not noted on it.
And exhibit 169? And just describe for us, first of all, the shoe is missing, correct?
Correct.
So this photograph was taken after you removed it?
Yes.
And there appears to be a white spot on the floor here on the passenger side, correct?
Yes.
And if you want to just maybe take the stylus and draw around it. And at the time you removed the shoe, did you notice that there?
I did see it, yes.
And did you remove it at the time?
No, I did not.
Why not?
At the time, again, I didn't have any information that I was looking for anything like a pill or resembling a pill. It was in the back seat of a squad car, so I wasn't exactly sure what it was, if it came off of somebody's shoe. So at the time, I didn't give it any forensic significance given the information I had.
And so you left it in that location?
I did.
Obviously documented it with photographs.
Yes, correct.
And when you were searching at that time, really what was sort of the focus of your forensic processing of this vehicle?
The focus of it was processing the blood in the back seat.
And so then there are some other, we see some white stickers in this photograph.
Correct.
Okay, we can come back to those later. After this initial processing, were you asked to do a subsequent processing of the squad car with relation to that apparent pill on the floor?
I was.
And do you know what sort of prompted that second processing of the vehicle?
I was informed on the morning of January 27th, 2021. I was informed by Special Agent Ryerson that the vehicle, the squad, was being towed back to BCA headquarters. They had met, some of our agents had met with defense attorneys on the case who had gone through the squad, and there was an additional request for evidence collection after that.
And that specifically was for this pill or other pill-like items in the vehicle?
Yes.
And so did you in fact then process the squad car a second time with that in mind?
Yes.
And have you seen exhibits 170 through 176?
I have.
And are those taken from the processing of that vehicle?
Yes.
Your Honor, to offer 170 to 176.
No objection.
170 through 176 inclusive are received.
I'm going to show you now Exhibit 170. When you began to process that vehicle, was it still sealed up from the initial processing?
It was not sealed up when it arrived at the garage.
Because others had already been in to look for this.
Correct, that was my understanding.
And so we're seeing in Exhibit 170, this back seat area, the pill appears to be present there as well, correct?
Yes, the pill is in the position it was on May 27th.
All right, and let's go to Exhibit 171. And did you assign this an item number?
Yes, I assigned it BCA item 51.
And did you then recover that item?
I did.
Can you describe describe its condition for the jury?
The pill was round in shape, however, it had a rough textured appearance to it, and there were no visible markings on this particular pill.
Did it appear like it wasn't whole any longer?
Yes, I think that's a fair statement, yes.
And then if we can go to 172, please. So this is a close-up of that item.
Yes, it is.
And so then you collected that, and did you make that available for further testing in the lab?
I did.
And we'll come back to that in a minute too. Exhibit 173, can you describe what's depicted in that photograph?
In this photograph, you can see an item that has been marked as item 52, and that is the rear driver's side of the squad car.
And can you describe for the jurors, well, let's move on to 174, and then describe for the jurors what item 52 is.
This is a closer photograph of item 52. It was a small, irregular shaped piece that could have been a portion of a pill. It had that same kind of rough textured appearance as item 51. There was no visible markings on this particular item either.
Was that collected for testing as well?
It was.
And then going to Exhibit 175. It's a little harder to see, but can you describe for the jurors what appear to be marked as items 53 and 54?
Yes, so in the background of the photo is an item marked as item 53. This was a small piece of what could have been a portion of a pill. Item 54, you'll actually see two item numbers for item 54. Everything else that looked like it could have possibly been a piece of a pill, so the small remnants and the powder that were remaining, I collected together as item 54.
And so let's go to Exhibit 176, please. And is this a close-up then of item 53?
Yes, this is a close-up of item 53, which looked like it could have been a piece of a possible pill. Although it was reddish-brown in color, it was actually stuck to the kind of the seat back portion of the rear passenger seat.
Did it seem consistent with 51 or 52 or 54?
It did seem consistent, except for the color difference. It did still seem consistent with the other pieces.
And was this also retained by you and made available to the lab?
Yes.
And in fact, you had done some testing yourself on these items?
Yes.
Right, you can take it down. Thanks. And you had done some DNA testing on that, correct?
Yes, I did some DNA testing in this case.
Which item did you do DNA testing on?
Initially, I did my DNA testing on 8 different blood stains that were collected from the back seat of the squad. And then in that same round of DNA testing, I did collect samples from 2 of the $20 bills that were recovered from the Mercedes-Benz SUV, and I did DNA testing on those items as well.
And did you do DNA testing on item 51 that we just saw?
Yes, in a subsequent report, I did item 51 as well.
And did you do DNA testing on items 52 to 54?
No, I did not.
Why not?
They were quite small. They were fragile. Item 51 itself was also pretty fragile, so I had to collect the sample very carefully. The other ones were too small and fragile and weren't conducive for DNA testing.
So why would you attempt to do DNA testing on item 51? What were you trying to find out?
In addition to doing DNA testing on item 51, I also tested it for the presence of amylase, which is a component of your saliva. So I did that first, and it was positive. So then I went on and did DNA testing on it.
So without going into a great deal of detail about DNA testing, what's the general premise behind what we all hear about as DNA testing?
So DNA testing, in this particular case, I did nuclear DNA testing. It's the type of DNA where you get half from your mom, half from your dad. You get it in a unique combination that makes you different even than your siblings. This DNA codes for hair color, eye color, to things you can't necessarily see. It's essentially your genetic blueprint. So we do DNA testing on items of evidence from a scene, and then we will compare those to known DNA samples.
And where or in what ways can DNA be left behind for forensic testing to be done?
DNA can be left behind in a variety of ways. So through a bodily fluid, so something like saliva or blood. DNA can be left behind by touching an object or handling an object. It can be found also in the root of your hair. So it can really show up in a number of instances.
And so when you have an item like item 51 that appears to be a pill, you can test to see if there might be the presence of saliva in there.
Yes.
And would that be true even if it appears to be dry?
Yes, it would be possible to leave that behind.
And what, well, describe for the jurors how you try to determine if there is or had been saliva on an item like that.
So the pill itself, I swabbed it with 2 swabs, so they essentially look like Q-tips. I swabbed each side of the pill together, and then from those swabs I took a small cutting of it, and then I used that small cutting of the swab and tested it with a chemical called Phaedibus, which is what we use to detect the presence of amylase, which is found in saliva. So if that test is positive, it indicates that there could possibly be saliva on that particular sample.
And with regard to item 51, what did you find?
It was positive.
So there was amylase indicated that there had been the presence of saliva at one time.
Yes, that's correct.
And did you then conduct DNA testing on item 51 to try and determine, well, on the swabbing from item 51 to try and determine the source of that saliva?
Yes, I did.
And did you conduct the DNA testing in accordance with the standard operating procedures you need to do in an accredited lab for DNA testing?
Yes, I did.
And did you have a known DNA profile for George Floyd?
Yes, I had a known DNA sample from Mr. Floyd that I had previously developed in my first round of testing.
So based on the testing of item 51 and that known sample, what did you find?
From item 51, that the swab collected from that pill, I obtained a single source male DNA profile that matches George Floyd. This DNA profile would not be expected to occur more than once among unrelated individuals in the world population.
So after you did your testing on item 51, did you make it available for other sections of the lab?
Yes, it was sent to drug chemistry after I was done.
Now, I've deviated a little from the original search of the squad car, the processing. So I want to go back to May 27th when you first processed the squad car, okay?
Okay.
You mentioned finding some apparent blood in the squad car, correct?
Yes.
And where was that located?
The blood was primarily located in the rear passenger side of the vehicle.
And have you seen what we have marked exhibits 177 through 182?
Yes, I have.
Your Honor, I would offer those.
177 through 182 are received.
I'm going to show you exhibit 177, please. When you are processing a vehicle and you see something that appears to be blood, is there something you can do to try and determine if it is in fact blood?
Yes, we have a presumptive blood test that we use. So we'll take a small portion of a stain that we think is blood, swab it up, and then use a 3-step chemical process on that swab. If the test is positive, the swab will turn pink. If it's negative, it'll stay, the color will stay unchanged.
And so when you are doing that, when you see things that might be blood stains, do you do that test for each of those blood stains?
Yes, for each of the blood stains, it would get its own presumptive test, yes.
We see in the center of this photograph, exhibit 177, that strap you had mentioned earlier. But then there are also these 3 white tags. Can you describe those for the jurors?
Yes, the 3 white stickers you can see are items 12, 13, and 14. Those are marking locations of potential blood stains. And then also on those stickers is a little notation. It says pH positive, and that means that that blood test that I performed was positive.
And do you recall how many separate stains you collected from that squad car that appeared to be blood, at least in this area of the squad car?
In this particular portion of the squad car, on the seat bottom, there was 4 different blood stains.
And then in other areas of the seat?
And then on the seat back, the rear passenger seat back, were an additional 4 stains.
So if we then go to exhibit 178, can you describe what we're seeing here?
In exhibit 178, you can see a photograph. In the center is an item marked item 10 with that pH positive. So this is marking a blood stain that was positive for the presumptive blood test. And then this is on the rear passenger seat back. And then item number 11, which is a little bit out of the photograph, is more in the door frame of the vehicle. And that was also positive for the presence of blood.
And so in this photograph, exhibit 178, what we're seeing on the left side as you're looking at it is what?
That's the door frame, or the very edge of the rear passenger seat, on the seat back side.
If we can go then to exhibit 179, describe this for the jurors, please.
These are 2 stains that are on the rear passenger seat bottom that have both been marked as items 14 and 15, and that pH positive, indicating that the blood test was positive.
It appears these are in the same areas where we saw that strap, item 9, sitting before.
Yes, the strap is right next to it.
And then if we can go to exhibit 180, describe this, please.
This is an item marked as BCA item 16. This was on the rear passenger seat back. And this, again, was an area that was positive for the presence of blood.
And exhibit 181.
This is a photograph of the seat back as well. And you can see 2 items of 2 stickers. Item 10 is an area that was positive for the presence of blood. And item 18 is also marking what I believed was possibly a blood stain. I didn't do the presumptive blood test while processing the squad at this particular time due to how small the stain was.
And then finally, exhibit 182. Now the strap has been removed and we see some other items here, correct?
Correct. This was after the strap was removed, and this denotes the 4 locations on the rear passenger seat bottom where blood was indicated, and I collected samples from each of those 4 areas.
So as we've seen then, there were, by my calculations, 7 different blood-like stains, 6 of which presumptively tested positive as blood, correct?
There were 7 that presumptively tested positive for blood and 1 additional, so for a total of 8.
8. And did you then, well, just describe for the jury where those generally were located in the squad car?
They were all on the rear passenger side of the vehicle.
And did you conduct further, well, let me ask you this. Did you take samples of those back to the VCA with you?
Yes, I collected a sample from each of those locations. They all were packaged up individually, and then they were sent for DNA testing.
And was DNA testing done on that?
Yes, they were.
Who did
on
that?
all of them. I did the DNA testing on those samples.
And when you tested each of those, did you follow the standard procedures necessary for your lab and DNA testing?
Yes, I did.
And what was the result of that testing?
From all 8 of those locations, I obtained a single source male DNA profile that matches George Floyd. And again, this DNA profile would not be expected to occur more than once among unrelated individuals in the world population.
So that was George Floyd's blood.
Yes, essentially.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Any cross? Well, we'll take our 10-minute break if you have cross. All right, 10 minutes, please.